welcome to Suspense She Shed Sunday. My name is Holly. I am your host that has true crime right in her she shed. I have some very exciting news. This is a 57-year-old cold case that was solved just today. The family finally got answers just today. First, I'm going to go through the case and the details of the case and the history of the case. And then I'm going to tell you who they said was the murderer of this little girl. First, I'd like for you to hit like and subscribe for true crime content right from my she shed, told by a Southern girl. How can it get better than that? This is a truly amazing case. 57 years in the making. This was a cold case. Finally, just today, the family has got answers. So exciting for the family and for all the investigators and officers that worked so hard on this cold case. First, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell you the history on the case. The little girl that was involved in this case. Then at the end, we're going to discuss the murder. On March 18, 1964, Marise Chiverella, who was 9 years old at the time, was sexually assaulted and murdered. Thank God this crime was finally solved. Marise was said to have been a shy girl that was very polite to everyone she met. She was also said to have been a big mama's girl. She only weighed 60 pounds and had the most beautiful smile. You can see her picture here. She was very religious. She went to Catholic school and she wanted to be a nun when she grew up. Unfortunately, her parents will never learn who the real killer was because they have both passed away. Her mother, Marise Chiverella, passed away at 90 years old in 2014. Her father, Carmen Chiverella, died in 2006. Her parents are buried near her. Her mother talked in this older interview. I'm going to show it to you real quick.
She's on my mind every day. And like things we do or somebody says something, it always reminds me of her.
She recalled the last day that she had seen her daughter leave for school. She hugged her and waved to her. She said she felt apprehensive about her leaving that day. Although she usually walked with her brothers and sisters to school, this morning she was leaving especially early in order to get canned goods to a nun for feast day. This was on March 18, 1964 in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. Marise was walking briskly down 4th Street because it was a cold, windy, they said super windy morning. And she was in a hurry to get to St. Joseph's School. And I told you in order to give those canned goods to the nun. The last person to see little Marise alive was her mom's cousin that lived on 4th Street. Helen Slattery had just gotten back from taking her 3 children to school. When she seen Marise walking down the sidewalk, she said Marise looked super cold. She is all bundled up. And she started to ask Marise if she'd like to come in and warm up. But she said she looked in such a hurry that she just let her walk on. And she always feels guilty about that day. She knew that Marise only had a couple of blocks to go before she got to the school. So she just let her walk on. Somewhere between that time and before she got to the school, she disappeared. A search soon began for little Marise because she didn't show up for school that day and she failed to come home for lunch as she always did. At around 1 p.m., her little body was discovered about 2 miles away in a coal stripping pit. An autopsy revealed Marise was hit on top of the head and once in the right temple. Someone had bound her little wrists and ankles with their own shoelaces and stuffed her scarf in her mouth. And she was also sexually assaulted. Such a cruel, cruel crime. Her official cause of death was strangulation, and the canned goods were found near her body. For years, investigators were looking at the possibility that Marise was kidnapped by someone who was in the Hazleton area attending a basketball game at St. Joseph's Gymnasium the night before. But that lead did not bring any breaks. They were looking into a young man who was in a wooded area near the coal pit where the body was found, who thought he saw the killer leaving the area. But investigators said that young man had some psychological challenges that made them question some of his information about what he saw that day. At one time, the murder of 9-year-old Carol Ann Dougherty, whom was raped and murdered in St. Mark's Church in Bristol on October 22, 1962, was said to be connected to Marise's murder because of the similarities in the murders, even though the murders occurred 1.5 years apart and about 100 miles from each other. Carol's murder occurred in a Catholic church, and Marise's occurred on the way to a Catholic church. On the afternoon of Carol's murder, she left home on her bicycle. She was going to meet some friends at the library so they could all hang out together. On the way, she passed the church and stopped in to have a prayer. St. Mark's students were encouraged by the teachers to stop into the church to say a prayer if they happened to pass by. And she passed by. So she leaned her bike up against the front and went in and had a prayer. So the other children seen her back there. They waited and waited on her, and they decided, well, she wasn't going to come out, so we'll just go on to the library. And they did. Carol's mother got worried when she didn't return by 5, because that just wasn't like Carol. So she got in the car to drive around, and then she spotted her bike in front of the church. And back in the day, you had to wear like a head covering to go into the Catholic church. She did not have her head covering with her, so she went back home, and where she got Carol's dad and Carol's little 3-year-old sister, and they headed back to the Catholic church. But she took Carol's dad back, and he went into the church while his wife and Carol's younger sister waited in the car. As the father walked in, he seen Carol's red plastic beret was at the top of the winding staircase that led to the choir loft. Then he found her on her back beneath the stained glass windows of the church. Her eyes were half open, her blonde hair a mass of tangles. Her right arm was twisted behind her back. Her left was straight out, her hand clenched. 2 dark pubic hairs, presumably those of her killer. One foot was bare. Her shoe was nearby. Her white sock had been rolled into a ball. It was soggy with her own saliva used as a gag. She was naked from the waist down, strangled with a belt, and sexually assaulted. A lot like Marise's crime. Semen was later found in her body and was tested before DNA advancement. All they could tell at the time is the semen came from someone young, old, or impotent. There was also pubic hair found on Marise's body. The pubic hairs were both compared to each other, and back then, they couldn't determine if they were a match. Marise also had semen on her jacket because she had been sexually assaulted as well. That is what brought this crime to a conclusion. Before they had the DNA to back anything, they really thought these 2 cases were connected. So they thought if they solved Carol Ann's, they would solve Marise's as well. They had several suspects in Carol Ann's death. One of those being a priest that worked at the church. This priest's name was Joseph SUSUPECT. He passed away in 1992 and was accused of molestation several times. One of the victims, who was only 4 years old when the molestation started, said that the priest had befriended her grandmother and even became so close that he went on vacation with the family. They would go on trips to Joseph's mother's house, and while they were there, he would crawl in bed butt naked and tell her, "That is how you show God's love." What a horrible person to involve God in such a foul act. Horrible. Another victim said he always had candy in his glove compartment to lure kids in and would often tickle her, and that's how the molestation had started with her. He even molested her brother. There was a couple of other suspects as well, but eventually DNA would clear all three of those suspects. In 2019, the state police unveiled images of a possible suspect for Marise's murder. This is what they thought he might look like at 25, 40, and 60. It is based on DNA technology used on evidence from the crime scene, as well as bodily fluids found on, as I said, Marise's coat. Just today, they said that it didn't look really much like the actual murder, and he ended up having blue eyes, not hazel, as in the images. Now, just today, we have the answers they finally wanted. Police have interviewed hundreds of people and accumulated more than 4,600 pages of investigative material over the years on both sides of the girl's case. Since 2007, state police say they have checked the killer's DNA profile monthly against all new entries into DNA database. And finally, we have the new DNA genealogy that came along. That is what uncovered this case. A relative was found of the murder. I want to now go to the news conference where the officer talks about who the killer is. Here it is.
However, we got numerous tips. We followed numerous leads. None of them proved to be viable from that news conference. However, what Parabon did do for us is they sent the DNA sample into a file called GEDmatch. And within GEDmatch, it's a genealogy database. And your DNA is compared to other people in that database, and we got a match. Our match was very distal. That came in 2019. It was very distal, which means I believe it was sixth cousin, approximately. Somewhere around like sixth cousin, so very distant match. So we conducted research trying to find out what family members were related using genealogy. In 2020, we came to an agreement with the Luzerne County District Attorney's Office to work with Mr. Eric Schubert in ES Genealogy. Mr. Schubert began immediately on our case and was working on a family tree so that we can go back and look at names of relatives of our DNA match. As we researched the list of relatives, our Pennsylvania State Police DNA lab alerted us to the fact that we never created a Y chromosome DNA profile. So your Y chromosome DNA profile is only found in males, and it follows your paternal lineage. So if you're a father, your son has the same Y DNA profile as you, as well as your grandfather, great-grandfather. It follows your line for paternal lineage. That was something new for us. It can mutate, but typically when it mutates, it's off 1 small percent, and it's typical that they find it in the same gene that mutates. So in 2020, we established that profile for a Y chromosome. While exploring the genealogical family names, we came across the surname of Palmino. The Palmino name was out of the Weatherly area. We recognized that name from an open homicide investigation that we had in 1972. Through that homicide, we had DNA from that homicide. We utilized that and confirmed through our lab that we were on the right ancestral track. So that was giving us the path to follow. While we were researching the genealogical track of that name, we came across the name of John Palmino. He was a New Jersey State Police captain. So we contacted him for help. He gave us our help. He gave us a family member of his that he considered to be their historian and had a family tree for everybody in his family going back generations. When we got that family tree through the remainder of 2020 and 2021, we interviewed numerous relatives from that family tree to see where it would lead. We acquired many DNA samples, and again, it started narrowing down our pool of suspects. And we were fortunate enough for them to help us with that. So using the samples we obtained, we narrowed potential suspect list down to 4 individuals. One of those individuals had been arrested in 1974 by the Pennsylvania State Police. I believe it was Trooper Guide, who couldn't make it today. He was arrested for involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, sexual assault, and aggravated assault. The same person who was also arrested by Hazleton City Police Department in 1978 for reckless endangerment and harassment. Armed with this information and the ability to eliminate the other 3 suspects, we found our main suspect. So our suspect has been identified as James Paul Fort. He was born in 1941 and he died in 1980. Unfortunately, Mr. Fort's not alive for us to prosecute. However, he is the person that committed this crime.
And another thing that was very interesting about this news conference is a young man, just 20 years old, I think he's fixing to turn 21, that is actually a genius. He's been working on genealogy since he was 10 years old. I'd love for you to hear him because that is such an interesting story to me. He is an interesting character. Here he is.
Our next speaker is Mr. Eric Schubert from ES Genealogy. Mr. Schubert sent me an email years ago asking if he could work on our case. For the Pennsylvania State Police, that's a little outside the box. This decision paid off. Mr. Schubert provided a service that we would have never expected, and he reached out to us. We are proud to have him here, and I'm proud to introduce him to come up and speak next, Mr. Eric Schubert.
Thank you, Trooper Petrosky, for the very, very kind words. As was said, my name is Eric Schubert of ES Genealogy. I was the independent consultant brought on through the District Attorney's Office to conduct a genealogy investigation into this case. And on a personal note, I really would like to say that the investigation that went into all of this work was probably the hardest genealogy task that I've ever faced in over 10 years, as long as I've been doing genealogy. I would dare to say that this was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my entire life. And it means so much to me that I was able to be on the team that could provide answers for the Chiverella family.
For Eric, you mentioned you're not even 21 yet, correct?
Still 20.
But I heard that you've been doing this for 10 years, you said?
Yeah, I've been involved in genealogy for about 10 years. I've been involved in cold cases for about 2, and genetic genealogy for about 5. So this is certainly a case that I've been working on for a long time, as I've mentioned, as has everyone else here, and it couldn't have gotten done without everyone's input and opinions and that sort of thing coming into the case.
How did someone get into genealogy at 10 years old?
Just on there, if you could say that for 1 second. I vetted him before we used him. He did help solve other cold cases. There was one, definitely I talked to a police department in Chicago, outside of Chicago. Couldn't talk any better about the man. And another Upper Marion Police in outside of Philadelphia he helped with. So I did vet him, so we knew what we were getting, and we're very thankful for what we got.
I was just going to say, Eric, how does someone get into this line of work at 10, 11 years old?
I was homesick a lot when I was a kid, so I would see genealogy commercials, and I would say, wait a second, maybe I could do that. And I thought it would be a 2-week thing, and here I am. But I'm certainly thankful I started.
I'm a little kid, and I'm good at genealogy, and I've been able to solve this 50-plus-year-old murder case. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the news reports, and at the time, I had previous cold case experience. I was looking for my next case where I could potentially be of help. And Marise's case was, I believe, I remember it vividly, it was the first one I came across when I started looking for the next area in which I could help. So I certainly didn't know if my strategy of just reaching out and saying, hey, I think I know what I'm doing. If I'm not stepping on any toes, I'd be happy to help. I didn't think that would work, but it did, and I'm very thankful for that. Because I knew that I could at least potentially get this case a little closer to being solved. And in the end, I'm happy we could pull it off.
Yeah, what college did you attend?
Elizabethtown College in Lancaster County.
And are you a junior? Senior?
Yes, junior.
What's your name?
History. Shocker.
Go ahead in the back.
Eric, have you ever considered doing a podcast or anything?
I mean, maybe I'll have to take you up on that idea now that you've said it.
Last but not least, here is the family of Marise Chiverella. The man talking is Ron Chiverella, who is her brother, and a sister talks for a second as well.
Our mother reached a point over a number of years where she, not sure the conditions, but she told us all that she forgave the man that murdered her daughter. Okay?
Her biggest concern was what happened to the girl.
And we've talked in recent days, obviously, and one of the items that we do recall was the days after the incident. We always said grace before meals on certain Sundays, not every day, but on Sundays and special meals. And my mother would always lead us in grace, but she would always end it with a prayer asking Jesus and Blessed Mother, please help the Pennsylvania State Police find the man that hurt my daughter.
I'm sure that Marise's parents would be so happy to have known that they finally, even though they don't have justice really, they have answers to this case. Her family finally has answers. He passed away, unfortunately, of a heart attack at 39 years of age. Wow, quite young. Well, maybe that was his justice, because he is not. I can't say that. I don't judge anybody. But he may not be in a very nice place right now. Well, guys, that's it for my show. And I'm so glad I could bring this crime case to you on the very day that they received the answers. And it's an exciting day for all involved. Hit that subscribe button for more from Murder She Shed. Don't forget to return and watch my videos. I'd love to have you. I didn't even tell you a rhyme today. You should be glad. All right, guys. Have a blessed week. Stay safe. And just keep your children safe. That's hard to do sometimes in this very crazy world. Be aware of your surroundings at all times. Love y'all. Y'all come back and see me. Bye.